As part of my contribution to this research effort that's examining migration, human rights and Islam in the GCC, I have drawn on my previous work and expertise, which is largely on labor migration governance and policy in the 6 countries of the Gulf Cooperation Council. And I have focused my analysis on the United Arab Emirates and Qatar in particular. These 2 countries, when it comes to labor migration, provide, I think, the closest comparative match out of the 6 GCC countries. Although the UAE is a much larger country and has a much larger population, proportionately, both the UAE and the GCC have similar numbers of foreigners to nationals in the labor market. Both these countries also have had a similar evolution in terms of the history of migration to the region, and are currently also going through similar processes of labor migration reform. The UAE has been a bit earlier on the game in terms of this, and is ahead of Qatar in terms of new reforms and legislation it has undertaken over the last couple of years around labor migration. But the pattern of reform that we see evolving in Qatar is quite close to what we already know has occurred in the UAE. Both these countries have also, over the last couple of years, come under a lot of international scrutiny and attention on the issue of migrant workers' treatment and migrant workers' rights, and have also drawn the attention of migrants advocates, international advocates for migrants' rights, who have used the occasion of global or international events being hosted in these 2 countries to garner attention to the issues around the treatment of migrants. Qatar's successful bid for the 2022 FIFA World Cup and the United Arab Emirates' successful bid for the World Expo to be held in 2020 have served as platforms for raising a global awareness on the issues of migrant workers. In the context of my contribution to this project by Kyle, I was asked to look at possible perspectives derived from Islam, which might help us understand some of the prevailing human rights issues. My main work in the past has really been to look at the international human rights discourse, the evolution of international treaties supporting the rights of migrant workers. And in the course of my examination on the international human rights discourse, I have found some ambiguities and contradictions, because in many cases, while we continuously speak about broad human rights for migrant workers, not just in the GCC, but globally, in essence, when we actually dig deeper into what states are willing to consider when it comes to migrant workers, these are rights that are largely associated with their economic and labor contribution to the host country. And so many of the reforms that we're seeing in the GCC, that the UAE has undertaken and that Qatar has committed to, are reforms that focus specifically on migrant workers' labor relationships. So they're reforms around the fair payment of wages and timely payment of wages, or else we're talking about adequate safety in the workplace, fair work hours, adequate rest and time off, vacation days, and these sorts of issues. So in trying to address some of the outstanding human rights issues, I have suggested that perhaps what we can do is focus the lens of Islamic economics. Islam has a lot to say to us about what a humane economy should look like. And in the GCC countries, we have already seen that many of the governments as well as private sector actors have adopted elements of Islamic economics when it comes to the control of finance, investment, and sort of the capital. So if there is already an established tradition and acceptance in the GCC countries of applying economic principles derived from Islam in relation to capital and finance, I believe that we can use a similar approach to actually looking at the development of humane labor relationships.